My grandpa almost died because of a Christmas tradition. In my family, we had one tradition we never skipped. The oldest person in the family had to dress up as Santa Claus and hand out the gifts. It started decades ago when my mom's grandpa came up with the idea. The old fireplace in our living room became part of the act, and every Christmas felt magical because of it. But this year was different. My mom's dad, who had worn the red suit and fake beard for years, passed away in the spring. Everyone figured the tradition would die with him. Mom even said it wouldn't feel right to keep it going since it was his passion and his idea. None of us grandkids argued. It felt more respectful to just let it go. Except my other grandpa, my dad's dad, my mom's father-in-law, had different plans. He was 3 years younger than the other grandpa and decided he should take the torch. Only thing is, he never told anyone. He wanted it to be a surprise. Christmas Eve came. The house was packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The table was loaded with food. The tree was glowing, and the kids were bouncing off the walls waiting for presents. The only person missing was Grandpa. His phone was off, but that wasn't unusual. He was always late. Dad just kept saying, "Relax, he'll show up." Then, right as we were exchanging Christmas wishes, Dad glanced out the living room window and froze. "Someone's climbing on the roof," he shouted. We all ran to the glass. Sure enough, in the dark, we could see a figure with a ladder making their way up onto the roof. A burglar. One of my aunts yelled, "Christmas Eve is when people let their guard down." There was no time to think. Dad bolted outside, grabbed the ladder, and shoved. The figure toppled off the roof and hit the ground hard, maybe a 12-foot fall. Not super high, but the guy's head cracked right against the concrete. We all rushed outside as my parents flipped on the porch lights, and that's when we saw him. A man sprawled out on the ground, unconscious, in a Santa suit. Dad just whispered, "What the hell?" We pulled off the mask and froze. It was my grandpa, my dad's dad, the very same guy we'd been waiting for at the table. Oh my God, my mom gasped, hands on her head. He was trying to come down the chimney. It clicked for everyone instantly. No one had ever actually climbed the roof for this tradition, but Grandpa clearly wanted to go big, to do a wow entrance by dropping presents down the chimney like the real Santa Claus. Only his plan had gone horribly wrong. He was lying there out cold, and Dad was already calling 911. The rest of us stood in a circle, terrified, wondering if he was even breathing. Then suddenly he twitched, coughed, and opened his eyes. We all exhaled in relief, but then he looked around with this dazed expression and said, "Who are you people? What am I doing here?" And that's when the real problem started. The ambulance pulled into our driveway about 10 minutes later, but it felt like an eternity. 2 EMTs jumped out and ran straight to my grandpa. One immediately checked his pupils with a flashlight, the other strapped on a neck brace. "Fall from a height?" one of them asked quickly. "About 12 feet, hit his head," my dad answered. Grandpa wasn't completely unconscious anymore, but he was acting strange. When the EMT asked him his name, he said, "I don't know." "And who are you people?" We all exchanged worried looks. "That's my father," Dad blurted. "He just fell. He must be in shock." The EMTs secured him to a backboard and loaded him into the ambulance. My mom tried to climb in too, but they stopped her. "We'll take him to the ER first. You'll need to follow in your own car." And that was it. The doors shut, and the wail of the sirens cut through the silence of Christmas Eve. Back inside, the house felt hollow. The food on the table, the gifts under the tree, the Christmas wafers ready to be shared. None of it mattered anymore. Dad looked around at everyone and said, "Christmas is canceled. We're all going to the hospital." "No," one argued. The kids threw on coats, the aunts grabbed their purses, the uncles started up their cars. A little convoy of family vehicles headed straight for the county hospital. The ER was chaos. A screaming kid with a cut on his forehead, someone in a wheelchair with a leg cast, a line of people clutching paperwork. The EMTs pushed Grandpa through the crowd and straight into imaging. We were left pacing in the hallway. About half an hour later, a young, exhausted doctor came out and gave us the update. "He's lucky," the doctor said. "No spinal fractures, but a severe blow to the back of the head. Concussion. Possible bleeding we need to monitor. The biggest issue right now is amnesia." "Is it temporary?" my mom asked. The doctor shrugged. "Could be gone in a few hours, maybe a few days, maybe never." When they finally let us see him, 5 of us went in. Me, my sister, Mom, Dad, and Grandma. Grandpa was pale, hooked up to an IV, but awake. He looked at us, and his face filled with fear. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. "Get out!" Grandma actually staggered back. "Joe, it's us! I don't know you!" Grandpa shouted. "Security!" The room turned into chaos. Nurses rushed in, then the doctor. Grandpa thrashed like we were strangers, trying to attack him. "For now, it's better if you don't upset him," the doctor told us. "He's in shock." We were escorted out. The rest of Christmas Eve was spent on cold plastic chairs in the hospital corridor. The kids whined, the uncles tried to make small talk, but we were all thinking the same thing. Grandpa had no idea who we were. By morning, the doctors had calmed him down. They said his memory still hadn't come back, but at least he'd stopped panicking once they explained that the strangers who kept visiting were actually his family. He didn't believe it completely, but he wasn't fighting them off anymore. The next day, we all crowded into his room again. The doctor tried to walk him through it. "This is your son," he said, pointing at my dad. "I don't have a son," Grandpa replied flatly. "This is your daughter-in-law," he continued, pointing at my mom. Never seen her before, and it went like that for every single one of us. Finally, the doctor sighed. "His condition is stable, but the amnesia is significant. The best option is to start neurological rehabilitation, specialized therapy to help restore memory." My dad asked about the cost. The number the doctor gave made my aunt sit down in shock. It was basically a lifetime of savings, and that only covered a few months of treatment. Mom sighed. "We don't have a choice." And right then, the whole family agreed. Even if we had to sell half the house, we'd do whatever it took to bring Grandpa's memory back. After 3 days of observation, Grandpa was released from the hospital. The doctor said his condition was stable, but his memory still hadn't returned. They recommended he stay under family supervision while starting intensive neurological rehab. It all sounded logical enough, but none of us were prepared for what happened next. When Dad brought him home, Grandpa stepped into the doorway and looked around the house like it was the first time he'd ever seen it. "This isn't my house," he said calmly. "Who let you people in here?" "Dad, this is your home," my father tried to explain. "You've lived here your whole life." Grandpa shook his head. "Never been here before." We sat him at the table, and Grandma poured him some tea. He stared at the cup, then at her, and asked, "And who are you, ma'am?" Grandma broke down crying. The next day, he walked into his room and saw the TV. "What's that?" he asked. "Your television," Mom told him. "You watch the news, sports, movies here." Grandpa Grandpa picked up the remote, hit a button, and when the screen lit up, he jumped back like he'd seen a ghost. "They're watching me," he shouted. He spent half the day covering the TV with a blanket so no one could spy on him. It was even worse with the dog. Our German Shepherd, who used to be Grandpa's shadow, ran up wagging his tail. Grandpa looked at him and screamed, "A wild wolf! Get it away from me!" The dog just sat down, confused, while Grandpa locked himself in his room. Every day we tried to jog his memory. We pulled out family albums showing him pictures, my parents' wedding, christenings, old beach vacations. "That's you right here," I told him, pointing at a photo of him holding me as a baby. Grandpa stared at it for a long time, then shrugged. "Looks like me, but it's not." My sister played old VHS tapes where Grandpa was dancing with Grandma at a wedding. He smiled at the screen and said, "Nice couple. Do you know them?" It was heartbreaking. Daily life turned into a minefield. One morning he tried to walk out of the house in slippers, saying he needed to find his real home. We caught him halfway down the stairwell. At night, he refused to sleep in his own bed because he was convinced it belonged to someone else's bedroom. The worst was meals. He refused to eat unless the dog tasted the food first. He'd sit and watch carefully, convinced we were trying to poison him. After a week, it was obvious. Without professional therapy, nothing would change. The neurologist was blunt. He needs cognitive rehabilitation, memory exercises, stimulation, therapy. It's expensive, but it's the only chance. The cost sounded like a bad joke. Dad drained his savings, the aunts chipped in cash, Grandma gave up heirloom jewelry, and my uncle took out a loan. Everyone agreed. Whatever it took, we'd save Grandpa. A therapist named Alicia started coming 3 times a week. She brought memory cards, puzzles, little games. Grandpa went through the motions, but without any enthusiasm. "You're just trying to convince me I'm someone I'm not," he would mutter. "I don't believe you." But every once in a while there were flickers. One afternoon, Grandma fried potato pancakes, and when the smell hit him, Grandpa froze. "I know this," he whispered. "My mother used to make this." We all froze too. It was the first sign that something was breaking through. Other times, though, he created false memories. He once pointed at my uncle and said, "You're my brother, right?" My uncle awkwardly patted him on the shoulder. "No, I'm your son-in-law." Grandpa refused to accept it and kept calling him brother for days. Week after week, our family life became a test of patience. Every single day, Grandpa felt like a new tenant we had to teach from scratch, who he was, where he lived, and who we were. And we all knew deep down that if this therapy didn't work, we'd lose him forever. The first weeks of therapy felt like an endless battle with time and money. A young therapist named Alicia started coming to the house, trying to pull out anything from Grandpa that resembled his old self. She laid out memory cards, photos of famous people, simple games. Grandpa went through the motions but treated them like pointless tasks. He often asked why he had to sit with this woman, since he didn't even know her. The family was going broke. My dad emptied his savings, my aunt sold her car, Grandma gave up her heirloom jewelry, and my uncle took out a loan. Every dollar went to treatments, neurologist visits, and special therapy sessions. Instead of preparing for New Year's, the family gathered for nightly meetings on how to split costs. Grandpa was still a stranger. He could sit for hours staring out the window, and if anyone tried to talk to him, he'd just turn away and answer coldly. There were glimmers of hope, though. One day, Grandma served him chicken soup. Grandpa lifted the spoon, sniffed it, and suddenly looked at her differently. He said quietly, my wife used to make this." Grandma burst into tears. It was the first time since the accident he'd called her his wife. A few minutes. Later, he got confused again and asked who she really was. Sometimes it was dangerous. A few times, Grandpa tried leaving the house at night. He'd open the door and say he had to go find his real family because he was living with strangers. Once, a neighbor caught him outside in pajamas. After that, extra locks had to be installed. The doctors kept repeating that therapy would take months. Results could appear suddenly, in the least expected moment. The family clung to that hope like it was their last lifeline. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone feared we might never get the old Grandpa back. The breakthrough came out of nowhere. During one memory session, Alicia brought out a red bag with a Santa costume she'd found in the closet. She set it in front of Grandpa and asked if it reminded him of anything. He touched the fabric, sat silently for a moment, and then suddenly laughed. It was the first genuine laugh in weeks. He said, "Santa, I was supposed to be him." From that day on, things started changing. Little things at first. He recognized his favorite chair, knew where the silverware was kept, could point out which mug was his. Over time, bigger things came back. One morning, he called my dad by name. A few days later, he asked my sister about school, as if he remembered she was in high school. Progress was slow and painful, but undeniable. Every tiny step gave us hope. After 3 months, Grandpa could tell full stories from his childhood, though he still got lost in new memories. The most important part was that he was starting to recognize us again, not as strangers, but as his family. Spring came faster than we expected. With it, Grandpa began regaining bigger pieces of his life. The first real breakthrough happened during a family dinner. Grandma served his favorite pork chops, and Grandpa suddenly looked at my dad and said, "You always ate 3 of these and then stole 1 off my plate." We froze. It was such a small detail, but nobody had told him that since the accident. From then on, it only got better. He started recognizing people beyond the family, even neighbors. When he ran into Mr. Zbyszko from across the street, he said, "You're always borrowing my lawnmower and never filling the tank." Zbyszko laughed and replied, "Well, looks like Joe's back." Rehab continued, but Grandpa was eager to prove he wasn't a stranger anymore. He made his own breakfasts, sometimes even poured Grandma tea. One day he walked into his room, looked at the TV, turned it on himself and said, "And to think I thought this magic box was spying on me." For the first time since the fall, he sat through an entire news broadcast and even commented on the election results like the old days. There were still rough patches. Sometimes he'd get lost in time and call me by my dad's name from when Dad was young. Another night he woke up convinced he had to go to work, even though he'd been retired for years. Dad had to calm him down and explain he hadn't worked at the factory in decades. But the best moment, the one none of us will ever forget, came in May. We were all sitting at the backyard table. The sun was shining, Grandma brought out strawberry compote, and Grandpa suddenly looked around and said, "You know, I almost killed myself with that stupid Santa suit?" Silence fell, and then everyone burst out laughing and crying at the same time. He remembered the accident, why he'd climbed the roof, and that it was his own crazy plan that caused all of this. From that moment, his memory came flooding back faster. Every day, more pieces returned. In June, he told the story story of his wedding. By July, he recalled his first vacation with the grandkids. By August, he could name every cousin in the family without hesitation. By fall, he was nearly the same man he'd always been. Sometimes he'd pause, lost in thought, and ask how many years had passed since a certain event, but everyone knew he was back. The family was happy, though broke. We'd paid for the therapy with loans, pawned possessions, and borrowed money from friends. Still, nobody complained. Everyone said the same thing. It was the price of getting Grandpa back. When the next Christmas Eve rolled around, everyone was nervous. The tree sparkled, the table was set, the gifts waited under the branches. We all looked at Grandpa, wondering if he'd put on the red suit again. He just glanced around the room, sighed, and said, "No Santa this year. Let's start a new tradition. We'll take a family picture by the tree and remember those who aren't with us anymore." Everyone agreed. The photo came out crooked because my uncle messed up the self-timer, but we were all in it, smiling, with Grandpa in the middle, proud and calm. That was the end of our long-standing Santa tradition. In its place, we started a new one. No risky stunts, just something with more meaning.